Our organizations have called this People's Press Conference here today to raise the demands of working and oppressed people across the state of Indiana, not just as they relate to prisons, but also to disability justice, climate change, immigrants' rights, labor rights, and housing justice. Our demands are made all the more urgent by the ongoing pandemic, but they have their roots in an economic and a political system that predates the pandemic and which has totally failed working people. Our issues may seem divergent, and indeed, before COVID-19, the organizations that make up this coalition often fought for our own demands separately. We have seen that we are stronger together. By uniting our program and targeting the causes that produce the issues that we face, we are showing Indiana that a better world is possible and that we can build that world together. We will hear from 5 organizers today who will share their organization's perspectives. First up, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Riley Bowe, who is the president of the Initiative for Disability Education, Advocacy, and Support at IUPUI. Riley.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you all hear me better? Alright. Yeah, hi. Like Noah said, I'm Riley. I'm the president of the IUPUI. I came to talk to you all about the role of disability justice and what has been happening with COVID-19. So the pandemic has obviously swept across the land, and what we're seeing is a mass crisis economically, and we're also seeing a crisis in healthcare. Sorry, I just need to turn off my chair. So what we're seeing is a mass economic crisis and a crisis in healthcare. Healthcare benefits are being ignored. People are losing their jobs, and thousands are left scrambling in the wake of this pandemic. Disabled folks are among the many thousands of people in this country that are being affected very hard by the pandemic. As housing becomes difficult to procure because of the pandemic, and because so many private property managers and landlords are demanding rent, even in these troubling times where people are not able to either afford rent or they have just lost their job. With housing discrimination being a very troubling issue, especially for disabled folks, and if you're not able to work, you're not able to pay your rent, and if you're not able to pay your rent, the landlord will kick you out, and that rings pretty true for disabled folks as well. Also, with social welfare programs like SSI, disability, and food stamps, they're very restrictive on who can access these benefits, and they often ask, a multitude of questions to determine "quote unquote" eligibility. I know I have to talk with somebody for my benefits as well, because I get SSI. And what happens is that a lot of the times people are often denied these benefits, and that can lead to eviction. That can also lead to a loss of income, and that leads to diminished Medicaid and Medicare and healthcare. Also, with the pandemic, thousands of people with disabilities are are facing poverty. They're facing homelessness. And that's a very troubling issue, especially for me personally. Excuse me. But what needs to be done is that there needs to be a push for healthcare for everybody. What needs to happen is that there needs to be rent freezes. There needs to be safety cushion for those who are most affected by this pandemic. But what we're seeing now is Jeff Bezos in his trillion-dollar mansion sucking the life force out of so many workers with his ridiculousness. And you know, people like Jeff Bezos and other celebrities and media moguls and wealthy people are sitting in their trillion-dollar mansions while folks in the working class and others are suffering from the pandemic. So that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a rent freeze. There needs to be better health care for people. There needs to be some sort of measures taken in place so that disabled folks are not put out as a result of this pandemic. So Jeff Bezos and others, why in the hell why are you in your trillion-dollar mansions when you could be helping people? You could be redistributing your wealth to people. You could be helping, but instead you're not. And that is just the crux and the faultiness of what the ruling class is continuing to make happen with this pandemic. And I think that's what needs to happen. There needs to be better things for disabled folks, like so many of us. I think I speak to this on the birthdays of Ho Chi Minh, Malcolm X, and Yuri Kochiyama. I salute to them. And I salute to the millions of people out there who are risking their safety in order to help people in the most troubling of times. I salute to the revolutionaries who came before me. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley, for those important insights. Our next speaker today is Claire Kaneshiro with the Indiana Climate Coalition. The Indiana Climate Coalition started just this past year with a climate strike right here at the State House. And even with the pandemic, plans are still moving forward. Please welcome Claire.
Thank you. Can you hear me well enough?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. My name is Claire Kaneshiro. I'm a high school student in Indy, and I'm part of the Indiana Climate Coalition. But I'm not just here to represent them, but I'm here to represent all people. The Indiana Climate Coalition is a group of socially aware, environmentally conscious individuals, organizations, including CSL, 350 Indy, Youth Empower Indiana, and so many others.
This people is fucked up.
We are here together from different generations, from different backgrounds, organizations, to advocate for the one thing we all share, our planet, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the soil we dig in and live in. And this coalition is organic and living, and we're always changing to adapt to the different circumstances. Here we are now, in the age of social distancing, we've adapted still. This coalition came together last year, as I said, to plan the September 2019 climate strike. We came on this very lawn here was the place where I first discovered activism. That was the day where I rode the Indigo bus 34 down here, carrying my sign saying denial is not a policy, and it was not then and will not be now. Those who live in the reality of injustice, environmental injustice, social injustice, racism, sexism, and all the systems of oppression, they don't have a choice. We don't get to choose our situation, but the people in power do. And we cannot keep up denial. And I know now that our grievances, our existence, our lives cannot be ignored. I know now that the people have the power to speak truth to power. So this year, the Climate Coalition met every Monday for months and months to prepare for a digital climate strike on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Many of us say that this marks 50 years of inaction. We called on legislators, we held strike signs, we did the best we could. Clearly that is not enough yet. So in the future, we're here to remind them that we're here for a Green New Deal. Why a Green New Deal for Indiana? Well, we need a Green New Deal because science shows that the climate is changing. Because temperatures are predicted to rise 5 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century. And y'all, that's only 30 years away. I'm only going to be, 47 then? That's in my near future. We need a Green New Deal because people of color, because women, because every marginalized community gets to suffer the worst by the people who pollute the most. We need a Green New Deal for the people, for every Hoosier. So I'm going to share with you some of the demands of the Green New Deal that Connie and I have been working on. There are 10 demands, but this is a living and breathing document that will continue to change. And we're here to listen to you and what you need as well. Because we need a Green New Deal that serves everyone. So here we go. The first demand we have is to close all coal, oil, and natural gas plants. Fossil fuels are not the future. Our second demand is 100% renewable energy for Indiana. Renewable energy is not only the best ecological decision, but the best economical decision. We cannot put the burden of paying for increasingly expensive power plants on the people. We need a just transition to green industries led and owned by the workers. The people who've been disenfranchised by big corporations who do not serve us. We need environmental justice for all. For all the people who've been marginalized, who will suffer the worst. We need reparations for communities of color who are polluted by systemic racism. Oil, coal, natural gas, that's 81% of our energy source. What happens when that is gone? We need to make public transit free for all. You know, the city can afford it, and the people need it. And public services should be just that. We should not be forced into a system of pollution because our cities are only built for cars, and for those who can afford them. We need to immediately remediate our all groundwater contamination and make the responsible parties pay for it. In my school, where I work at a community garden, we have to be careful because we're on the White River where systemic racism has forced sewage and polluted water into those communities of color from other parts of the city. And this is a reality that we all live in. 7, make curbside recycling and composting a public service. Only 20% of our waste is ever recycled and composted. For years, Indiana has set a goal of 50%. Yet somehow, I know that we'll never reach that without accessibility, affordability, ways to feed the hungry. As much as 40% of the food produced in the United States is wasted every year. Yet 1 in 6 Hoosiers, or 1 million of us, go hungry. That doesn't feel right. 9. Protect Indiana's natural environment. Our national parks, our state parks. Did you know that almost over 80% of that is available to commercial logging? That's environmental destruction. I don't see protection there. And 10, enforce the regulations. We've seen the Trump administration take advantage of this crisis to loosen regulations on agribusiness. We've seen the coal ash ponds, the manure that's tainted our land and our water go unchecked. And now, of all times, we need this protection. We need a government that serves the people. We need the people to power. And this is our vision. We will organize and work and fight and write for this. And we will support you all as you do the same. Because we don't have the luxury of sitting here waiting for the next crisis, the next tragedy, the next death, for someone to decide it's time to take action. Even though we're physically apart, we will rise up together. Thank you.
Bluetooth disconnected.
Thank you, Claire. Our next speaker today is with the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, who was behind the May 1st May Day caravan that took us to the ICE detention center in Brazil, where we protested in Clay County. Please welcome Mari Luna.
Hello. Hi, my name is Mari, and I represent the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance. And we stand in solidarity with all groups today present. As we face a global pandemic driven by capitalism in this country, undocumented workers and our families have been forced to choose between continuing to work under unsafe conditions with no protection or sick pay, or expose their families to the disease, the virus, or lose their only income with no access to aid at all. As we've seen, there's been multiple stimulus checks have been proposed. None have, until now, included the undocumented community. Despite this, we are still under continuous racial attack, under criminalization for migrating, and we are rejected by elected officials and their followers. Agencies and assailants like ICE, fuck ICE,
Fuck ICE.
capture our people to fill private jails and prisons to work for $1 and a meal a day. Right now, thousands of black and brown people are denied, detained, separated from their families, while some await deportation and are exposed to death in so-called detention centers, which we know are concentration camps.
Say that.
But let us not be distracted by this amplified racism and ostracizing of our undocumented community. During these times, we have so much power, and we have to realize that the people are our salvation. We are the salvation of this fucked up country. We have always been undocumented, and we will continue to be undocumented until the pandemic is over. The difference now is that the sleeping giant has awakened. This country will no longer get away with using our bodies as disposable items during this pandemic. It must respect and protect us with access to health care, safe and dignified working conditions, aid, access to health, shelter and food, and protection from family separation. We are more than essential workers and bodies to dispose of. We are human, working mothers, single mothers, students. We are laborers, farm workers, and construction workers, entrepreneurs, merchants, and painters. We are the humanity and the love that challenges the Constitution of this country. Our labor and our hands, we will lift the pillars that rebuild the nation. The pandemic has been an excuse for the government to vilify us for the benefit of bigots and racists. But we will no longer stay silent. When the state fails us, our community cares for us and sustains us. This is how we will thrive, because again, we are this nation's salvation. Power to the people.
Power to the people. claps regardless.
Thank you so much, Mari. Our next speaker, because we know that the workers' struggle has no borders. La lucha obrera no tiene fronteras. Our next speaker is fellow worker Dax with the Industrial Workers of the World. Please welcome Dax.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank my union for having me come out here in tumultuous times to speak to you all and speak to all the people at home, or I guess I say, you know, tumultuous times. We've been told, of course, that things are getting better and we're on the path to recovery, so of course it can't be. Now tell me, do you all feel safe?
No.
Damn right. You know, now up in Cass County, in northern Indiana, in the meatpacking industry there, over the past month, we have seen 150 cases of people who have gotten COVID. And they have now been deemed critical industry, and they've been told they have to return to work. Well, the state government, they stepped in to save us. They said that, you know, well, they don't have to reopen with the rest of us. They can wait. They can wait until today, that is. Tell me, Cass County, do you feel safe now? Do you feel like you've been given enough time? Because I know I don't. And it's not only them, it's Amazon here. You know, just last week, Amazon has reported another death in workers in their factory who are continually forced to come to work or be deprived of their livelihoods. To be honest with you, I don't even know how many that is. They're not telling us. What does that tell to you? If they think of their workers as so disposable that they don't even have to say when they die. But it's not just the big businesses. I can tell you that I and my fellow workers have been affected personally by the demands of the governor to go back to work. My own partner has to return to her job in the service industry, or she will be marked as having quit voluntarily and therefore lose access to any company health benefits, to any sort of unemployment benefits, basically left to the wolves. And this is what people are leaving us. You know, we're having an increasing strain of people who are filing for unemployment. 600,000 people plus in Indiana alone have now filed. And we are seeing barely a fraction of these people being able to receive any benefits, including, mind you, healthcare benefits. So if they get, you know, if they get COVID, or even if they think they have COVID, is there anything they can do? No. They don't have the means to go to the hospital. They don't have the means to seek the treatment. They can do nothing but let their community and their fellow workers basically die. So my final appeal to you here today, as a member of the Industrial Workers of the World, as a union, I know that Indiana is a state that has historically and especially recently been very hostile to unions. They have enacted laws that have prevented us from having closed shops. They have tried to do all they can to prevent the workers from organizing, but they haven't made it impossible. We still have the means to do so. And there are many industries that are not yet represented by union labor. And so I implore you all, everyone who is here, to join not only the Industrial Workers of the World, but any labor struggles that you can find nearby, so that we can have the only means that we have to fight back against this corrupt plutocracy who is depriving us of our rights and our ability to live. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dax. And as we know that the labor struggle is not just something that happens out here on the streets, but also happens behind bars, because prison labor is slave labor, just like wage slave labor is slave labor. And we have somebody here with IDOC Watch, one of the primary organizations behind the organizing around prison struggles here in Indiana. Please welcome Chris Steele. Thank you. At least 627 people incarcerated in Indiana prisons have now tested positive for COVID-19. 50% of those tested. 17 humans the state is keeping in cages died of the disease, as of 2 IDOC staff. At Westville Correctional Facility, in April, 92% of incarcerated people who were tested for the virus were positive. There have been several protests at Indiana prisons and jails in the last 2 weeks, and rebellions in 3 prisons. The National Guard has been called in to assist the DOC in managing the crisis.
The Department of Corrections and some county jails failed to release people and reduce overcrowding, thereby ensuring the rapid spread of COVID-19. Now, IDOC and Governor Holcomb are trying to cover up the fact that they're killing people. The first person confirmed by IDOC to have died of COVID-19 in an Indiana prison, Scotty Edwards, was 73 and had less than a year left to serve on his sentence. Social distancing is impossible in prisons. And since COVID-19 spreads prior to symptoms showing, without social distancing or mass testing, there's no way to stop the spread. COVID-19's deadliness increases in relation to the intensity of exposure. And in prisons, many people will be infected simultaneously due to the close quarters. So the intensity of exposure will also grow. 100,000 incarcerated people are predicted to die in the U.S. during this wave of COVID-19. In March, a plan was submitted to all three branches of Indiana's government that provided for the release of all people incarcerated in Indiana prisons who had less than a year left to serve. Approximately 25% of Indiana's prison population, over 6,000 people, has less than a year left to serve on their sentence. The American Civil Liberties Union and National Lawyers Guild filed petitions and submitted recommendations to the Supreme Court and Governor calling for mass release. Faith in Indiana, the American Friends Services Committee, and Unitarian Universalist Congregations of Indiana, and the Free 'em All Coalition are organizing for mass release. Thousands of people have called and written to the governor, IDOC commissioner, and courts asking for mass release. The governor, IDOC, and Supreme Court of Indiana each claim they do not have the authority to release people, and they're all lying. The truth is, they all have the power to release people. According to the law, all of them must agree to a petition for clemency or pardon. So just as they have agreed among themselves to lie about their power to release people, they could instead agree among themselves to release people. IDOC is also lying about the numbers of people in its cages who are being infected and dying from COVID-19. We know this because people inside the prisons have told us what's really going on. The IDOC response and preparedness plan for COVID-19 entirely fails to account for pre-symptomatic spread. The masks that incarcerated people were given tear when washed, and they're only given one. People are being denied medical care, including mental health medication, showers, and soap, and cleaning supplies. There's no hot water in some prisons. Officers are moving between units that are in quarantine and ones that are not wearing masks and working without PPE. Prisons have been on extended lockdowns during which people are not allowed any recreation, and access to water and toilets has been denied. Why are IDOC and Governor Holcomb lying about COVID-19 in the prisons, except to cover up the fact that they're killing people? Free Them All Coalition is composed of grassroots groups around the state of Indiana who have come together to fight for mass release from Indiana's prisons, jails, and detention centers due to the threat posed by COVID-19. We have been organizing protests at various detention facilities, and we won't stop fighting until our people are freed. If we want anyone to be freed, we need to fight together for all our loved ones to be free. That's what Free Them All means. We don't need to be arguing about who does or doesn't deserve to be freed when they're all facing an unjustified death sentence. If we fight together for all our loved ones to be freed, we'll have the best results for everyone, because we'll be able to apply more pressure. These are the demands of the Free Them All Coalition in the state of Indiana. Release everyone in IDOC custody who has less than a year left to serve on their sentence. Over 6,000 people immediately. Two, all sheriffs and county jails must stop cooperating with ICE and release everyone detained on immigration holds. 3, release everyone who's in prison or jail on a technical parole violation immediately. Next, release people who are elderly or vulnerable to COVID-19 due to underlying health conditions. Release everyone detained pre-trial because they can't pay bail. Provide temporary housing for those released using federal COVID-19 stimulus funds. so that those released can quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. Free medical care for everyone who remains incarcerated. And last, free communication. That includes video visits, GTL messaging, and phone calls for everyone who remains incarcerated. And today, we're going to be announcing a new demand. The Indiana State Department of Health needs to investigate the death of every person who has died of COVID-19 in IDOC custody, and investigate IDOC and Governor Holcomb's handling of the pandemic in the prisons in general.
They said
We are launching a
GCL
campaign to
calls.
pressure the Department of Health to carry out a full and thorough investigation beginning immediately. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris.
They want to know who
Our
making
next
the money off
speaker
GTL.
needs little introduction here in Indianapolis. Deputy Chairperson of the Indiana New African Black Panther Party, Kwame Shakur.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
I said all power to the people.
All power to the people.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
I say all power to the people.
All power to the people.
I say all power to the people.
All power to the people.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
So I'm glad to come out here today with my fellow comrades of all oppressed nationalities. As you can see, we have a unified coalition of all the oppressed communities coming together, working together on various different issues. All these issues are contradictions, social contradictions to this system that we're exposing of this capitalist imperialist system that's been affecting all of our communities. I want to speak to some of the issues of repression that's been going on, because this needs to be exposed. Recently, we was up at Pendleton just this past Saturday, and the pigs came out here to make their president known. They was taking pictures of a lot of the comrades here. They're starting their own intelligence, trying to deter us and intimidate us. Are we intimidated though?
No. Hell no.
I said, are we intimidated?
Hell no.
I say, fuck 12.
Fuck 12.
I say, fuck 12.
Fuck 12.
So they came out here starting to get their documentation of us, just like COINTELPRO tactics that they was doing back in the 60s against Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party. We see this as an escalation of this class struggle against the people, because they don't want to see the people unite. They don't want to see the people get organized like we doing now, you know. And this way here, we have to expose this contradiction of this system, because they always talk about they want the community to work together. They always talk about they want the community to stop violence and stuff. They always talk about the community needs to do this and that, but you want to attack the very people in the community that's actually doing that. That's a problem. You think what I'm saying? All power to the people?
All power to the people.
Say all power to the people.
All power to the people.
And we gonna continually expose what this government does. You know, Malcolm once said, in this country, democracy is really hypocrisy. You think what I'm saying? This is what we seeing right now by the pigs out here doing their counterintelligence on us, trying to deter us. But we wasn't scared. We went over there and introduced ourselves to the pigs. And you know, they said they came over here to stop the violence from happening. But I think we was the most peaceful demonstrations that's been going on. The only violence I've been seeing the last 2 weeks is the pigs. You know what I mean? Murdering people, beating people out in the streets.
Period.
So I think they need to start monitoring their own if they want to stop violence. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
I said all power to the people.
All power to the people.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
I say boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
So we call on the pigs, if you want to stop the violence in the community, start by going downtown with modern IPD. You know what I'm saying? IMPD is the ones that's causing the violence in the community. We've been peaceful. We've been using our First Amendment right the whole time out here. You know what I'm saying? I want to speak to one particular example where Boots, General Secretary Boots of the United Panther Movement Indiana branch, he was recently accosted by the pigs the other day. All he was doing was trying to pass out 10-point programs to the community on 71st and Michigan Road. you know what the pigs do? They follow him all the way there. Soon as he gets out the car, the pigs jumped on him and put him handcuffed him. Luckily, he was on the phone with other Panthers and heard about it, and they hurried up and rushed to the scene. But in the meantime, on their way down there to help General Secretary Boots, the pigs is asking questions like, "Oh, we smell marijuana." You know, Boots don't even smoke weed. You know what I mean? So this is ironic. You always use some of the same arguments to pull people over in the community to harass them and to intimidate them in order to violate their rights. You know what I'm saying? We have rights. We have Fourth Amendment rights of probable cause. You know what I'm saying? You gotta stop using all these subjective tactics, pigs, because we're not going for it no more. We're gonna start exposing these contradictions when y'all come at us. He also told General Secretary Boots, he said, do you have a gun in here to protect yourself? What type of question is that?
Period.
What kind of question is that? We think General Secretary Boots felt like they was gonna plant something on him. And we see this all the time. We got a lot of people in prison right now for shit they ain't do. They ain't do. I got a couple people in there right now. They got 22 years for something Indiana know he ain't do. Leon Benson. Y'all know he ain't do it. Roy Amos in there for something he ain't do. You know he ain't do it, Indiana. Vernon Bateman in prison right now for something he ain't do. You know it, Indiana. And we said we tired of that. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
We said all power to the people.
All power to the
We said
people.
boots on the ground.
Boots on the
We
ground.
said boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
So let's show how inconsistent it is. Soon as the comrades jump out, the pigs saw all these blue shirts pulled up. So what do? They show their pig color. What they really represent in our community. They ain't here to serve and protect us. Huey P. Newton said they here representing the repressive arm of the state continually brutalizing us. And we saw that. Because soon as they get there, the pig that was in his car told the other pig in the back, he said, man, take the handcuffs off of him real quick. The other pig had already did that. You dig? So we see, soon as they get here, why did you leave so quickly, pigs? If y'all was really following your own laws. You was here to harass and intimidate the Panthers, but we ain't gonna be intimidated. All power to the people.
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 Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the
So I
ground.
want to tell Chief Police Randall Taylor, if these situations keep on happening, we're saying it's your responsibility because ultimately these are your pig forces. So we're saying that you're calling on this to happen to our community to deter us from standing with the people. And we're not going to go for it, Chief Police Officer, Randall Taylor. So we putting you on notice. So if this is a rogue officer, you get a hold of him. But if he ain't, we saying it's a policy coming from you. And that's what we think in the New African Black Panther Party. All power to the people.
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 Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the
I
ground.
want to say one last thing. Our Minister of Defense is in Pendleton. Y'all been shaking him down on the regular. Y'all broke his tablet. Y'all told him y'all gonna teach him how Indiana gets down. You know, well I'm telling you, Commissioner of IDOC, we're gonna show you how we get down in this revolutionary move. We're gonna show you how this class struggle, goddammit, gets down like Fred Hampton said. Boots on the ground.
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 You keep on doing this to us, we definitely gonna respond accordingly. So now I want to read the demands that comes from the situation that came about a couple weeks ago when they killed a couple people in our community, May 6th and May 7th. This from the New African Black Panther Party, Indiana branch. I'm going to read our demands that we're going to be submitting downtown this week. So this is the demands of the New African Black Panther Party. We want all officers involved to be fired immediately without pay.
Period.
Say that. 1A. We want all officers involved in incidents stemming from May 6th and 7th to be indicted on murder charges where elements justify said charges. Say that. 2, we want Michigan Road renamed Drayshawn Reed Road. 3, we want the current community review board dissolved and a new one established with real oversight of it from the actual community that is affected the most by police terror in our community.
Period.
3A, we want community leaders of various organizations to sit on this community review board, including the new African Black Panther Party, Indiana branch. 3B, we want the composition of this review board to be made up at least 2/3 of the community so the community's best interests can be fully represented and not systematically denied.
Period.
Number 4, we want all street police to be stripped of lethal weapons and only be permitted to possess non-lethal weapons. 4A, if the country of England can do so and the state's class interests still serve, then there's no excuse for them not to do the same here in Indianapolis.
Yes, sir.
So those are our demands that we're going to be submitting to the city. Like I said, this is a contradiction that we think we can definitely wage. Because if the country of England don't have pigs on the street, and they can still maintain their class dictatorship of oppression against all our working class comrades over there, and y'all can still maintain that dictatorship over here, why can't you maintain this same class dictatorship over here with non-lethal weapons? We'll struggle with you still. We're going to still struggle with you. We're not even saying that the non-lethal weapons ain't going to lead to some of the ones getting killed in our community. But we believe exponentially it stopped this genocide where a lot of us is getting killed 1,000 a year. From 1870 to 1850, 4,004 people was lynched in the United States. You dig? Every year, 1,000 of us is killed by the police. Every year. Genocide. And we said it stops now. All power to the people.
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 Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. Our last speaker today is Derek Ford, an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Please welcome Derek up to the microphone.
Thanks, everybody. So, widespread crises bring about immense suffering and insecurity, pain, and even death. And because they're widespread, they bring this to vast segments of the population. Now, obviously, some segments of the population are affected more than others. And we've seen this, obviously oppressed nations, genders, sexualities, the disabled community, and all working class and poor people have suffered much more. But it's also, a lot of middle class people, a lot of professionals who thought that the system was working okay for them, and now they come to find out that actually the system isn't that good. But widespread crises don't just generate, insecurity and fear. They also generate new possibilities because they bring the most fundamental aspects of our social system into question, right? And because any social system, for it to reproduce itself, it needs people, the masses, us, to assume that it's natural and that it's inevitable and it's the sort of result of a long history that's now over. But the crisis has delegitimized that. And we've seen over the past 8 weeks that consciousness has shifted rapidly, dynamically, and in a radical way. Slogans like cancel the rent and like free them all, they were once sort of confined to the left, are now gaining widespread acceptance. The ruling class knows this, and that's why they've also responded rapidly, totally insufficiently, but also they've responded rapidly. I mean, if you think about it, IPL, Indiana Power and Light, they announced a moratorium on shutoffs before there was even a protest to demand it. Right? I mean, Trump sent, direct cash payments to hundreds of thousands of Americans without a protest about it, right? And a lot of people were excluded from that. I'm not saying that's sufficient or anything. There are moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures across the states. You know, some places, you know, as many as 6,000 prisoners have been freed. Now, if I would, you know, the first protest I was at this year was early January. We were protesting Trump's war against Iran. And if I would have stood up there and if I would have said, you know what, in 2 months, there's going to be a moratorium on shutoffs, there's going to be, you know, nationwide moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures, people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not going to happen, right? But it did happen, and it happened without any protest even. And the ruling class did it because they know that their system is delegitimized and that it's threatened. And so they want to throw some crumbs at the people so that we continue to buy into the system.
Right.
It shows, though, that the government can actually do a lot. And it shows that our demands, like disarming the police, aren't really that radical at all. You know, and they're not that impractical. That's what they say to us when they raise their demands. You got to be practical. You got to be practical. We can't do all that. But we've seen that they can do that. It's actually totally within their power, you know? And so the demands and the victories that we've won, which are insufficient, they need to be made sufficient, but they need to be permanent, you know? Because we've had it, we know that they can do it. If you can suspend shutoffs for 2 months, you can do it forever. And they should do it forever.
Period.
So really, our message is this, that now is a perfect time to intensify the struggle and to make a new normal where there are never any shutoffs or evictions and to win even more demands. Now, it's clear to many people here that we ultimately need a new system, but we can't advocate and fight for that system unless it's rooted in demands that people can relate to and that can improve their lives. Our government has a power to meet these demands. So I want to thank everybody out here for coming out, you know, for your tireless work, not just during the pandemic, but even before. And I want to highlight one demand that this coalition will be raising on May 30th, which is to cancel rent and mortgage payments for tenants, homeowners, small landlords, and other small businesses. We're in the worst depression since the Great Depression of the 1930s. It's likely to only get worse. A short-term suspension of evictions isn't enough to save people. And the meager rescue stimulus funds aren't enough. Even if there's another round, it's not going to be enough. These are crumbs. Canceling rents and mortgage payments for the duration of the crisis and after can be won. Since the start of the pandemic in the U.S., the federal government has allocated over $5 trillion to the biggest banks and corporations, but they've given only $200 billion to the people. The money is there. It's just a matter of if it's going to go to Wall Street or if it's going to go to the people. And unless we struggle, it's going to go to Wall Street. You know, I mean, right now, IPL, they're trying to make everybody here in Indiana pay for energy that we didn't use.
Right.
They filed a petition. They said, oh, we're losing money because we can't shut off people's electricity. We're losing money because people aren't using electricity. So we're going to jack up the rates. And they want to do that, and they will do that unless there's a fight against it. And so, you know, that's what we're here to do, right? We want to create a new system, but we have to do that by raising demands and by intensifying those demands and by intensifying the struggle to achieve those demands, because we can absolutely win. You know, there's a famous saying, Albie Cox, who was who struggled in the apartheid movement. He was a member of the Communist Party in South Africa, actually a Jewish person. He said once that, you know, revolution seems impossible until it actually happens, and then it seems inevitable. You know, I mean, if you were to think about in Egypt, before they overthrew the dictatorship, Hosni Mubarak, in early 2011, you know, if you would have stood on the streets in Egypt a month before and said, this dictator who's backed by the most powerful military in the world, the United States, has been a dictator for 30 years, in a month he's going to be gone, people would have said, that's crazy, that's impossible. But now we look back and people are like, yeah, that was bound to happen. It was bound to happen. So that's the perspective that we got to have, you know? Revolution seems impossible, but at some point it becomes inevitable. And someday we'll look back on the history of the United States and we will say that a social and economic revolution that overthrew the ruling class was inevitable. It was bound to happen. Thanks.
Good job.
All power to the people.
All power to the people. Thank you, Derek, for that very inspiring message. I'd like to close this press conference with just a few final words. This Saturday, May 23rd, our coalition will be in Carlisle, Indiana, to protest the conditions at Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. We'll be gathering at a nearby park for a brief rally before taking to our cars for a car caravan around the prison. We encourage everyone who can make it down there to join us Saturday at 2 p.m. And we've got some flyers in case you want extra info. Next weekend, on May 30th, like Derek said, we will be back here in Indianapolis as we join nationwide car demonstrations initiated by the PSL to call for the cancellation of rents and mortgages for tenants, homeowners, small landlords, and small businesses. So stay tuned to PSL Indianapolis on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for further details on that. And one last thing, if you would like to get involved, get in touch with the organizers who spoke here today. And also, we've got some clipboards and pens if you want to sign up for email updates. Make sure that we're staying in touch, make sure that we're staying involved. Like we said, we've got to continue to intensify this class struggle. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Thanks for being here.